Thank you both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigations and, you know, how, for example, how I was watching something the other night where somebody was unfortunately murdered, but you saw the crime scene investigators trying to work out from which side the person was attacked from. Did the knife come from the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is it all that kind of stuff? So for me, everything I've done since I've left the police is about sharing that knowledge of investigations, because if you watch TV, they get it wrong a lot. So what we try and do, I'm not the only police officer there, there's experts, of forensic scientists, psychologists, all from that investigative world. Just trying to get across, well, actually, this is how it's really done. This is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there. People who've really fought for justice for their children. People who are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that. When you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. I'm in a great mood today. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the Heart of Westminster and all across the UK.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
The unions are revolting. Sir Keir Starmer suffered an humiliating defeat when his union paymasters vowed to keep the winter fuel allowance and voted his vote down. Is this the beginnings of a left-wing revolution, a plot to topple Starmer, who's rapidly becoming the least popular Prime Minister in recent history? And yesterday, Keir Starmer's new Homes for Heroes policy won the backing of patriotic Brits. But does it really prioritise armed forces veterans, or could they still find themselves behind asylum seekers at the back of the queue? And on that point, GB News' political editor Chris Hope today sat down with the Prime Minister in New York, and we asked him the kind of questions that other media channels dodge. For example, will Homes for Heroes really put veterans first? Is it time to stop calling protesters racist? And does he regret that sausage howler? And next up, shamed ITV This Morning presenter Philip Schofield is set to dramatically return to our TV screens in Castaway, a new game show where he's stranded alone on a desert island. Does he deserve a comeback? Or should he just simply do us all a favour and stay on the island? That's all coming up in your next hour. Let's just deal with this now. The Labour conference has finished, and the biggest gaffe surely came from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. He was a bit of a silly sausage. Take a look at this.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
The return of the sausages. And, of course, people on social media have been very, very creative. Let's go through a few of the best of them now on your screens. Let's get them up. Let's get these sausage jokes out. This one is Sir Keir Starmer saying, I fear the worst. See what they did there? This one is sausages for all, towering from the sky. Look, tumbling sausages. And this one, all sausages matter, of course, taking the knee to Black Lives Matter and to black puddings. And this one here, Greg's hostage rolls, and there were many, many others simply not fit for a family show. But thanks for all of them coming in. Politics is a serious business, but sometimes, you know what, it's great to have a laugh too. Now, send your views, post your comments, and post your sausage memes if you still have some. gbnews.com/your say. But now it's time for your meaty news headlines. Here's Mark White.
Good afternoon. It's just after 3 o'clock. The main news from the GB News Centre. The government has reaffirmed its intention to cut the winter fuel allowance despite a vote at the Labour Party conference to reverse the controversial move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Although the vote isn't binding, it does put further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. Unite's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News she was disappointed the vote was moved to the very end of conference.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Well, the Health Secretary has told the conference on its fourth and final day that the NHS is letting people down as he promised to defend it as a public service.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear, but if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
The Prime Minister is at the centre of fresh controversy over a decision to accept several weeks' accommodation at a luxury property in London. The accommodation, worth more than £20,000, was made available by Labour donor Lord Ali. Sir Keir defended his decision to accept the offer because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs and said the family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. He insisted he wouldn't apologise as he'd done nothing wrong. The government has told Britons in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus. They'll oversee any plans for an emergency evacuation. Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. The terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a missile targeting Mossad headquarters. Hezbollah claims the intelligence agency is responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon. The Prime Minister, on a trip to the United Nations Security Council, said the government is ramping up its contingency plans in light of the escalating situation. The Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Metropolitan Police Sergeant Matt Ratana. Sergeant Ratana, who was nearing retirement after 30 years' service, was shot and killed in a police custody centre in South London 4 years ago. His killer, Luis de Souza, is serving life in prison after he'd managed to smuggle a gun into the custody suite. Although officers arrested him on drugs charges and possession of ammunition, they failed to discover the weapon in an underarm holster. The Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, paid tribute at the unveiling of the memorial. Well, Philip Schofield is returning to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on the Channel 5 show Castaway. The programme's producers have released a promotional video that already shows the 62-year-old on the beach. He posted to his followers on Instagram, "Now you know how I spent summer alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." Well, Schofield resigned from ITV last May after he admitted an affair with a younger male colleague. And finally, a new weather warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, which could cause further widespread flooding and travel disruption. The yellow warning's been issued for much of England and Wales, parts of the West Midlands and the northwest of England, between 5 p.m. tomorrow and 10 a.m. on Friday. The Met Office says there's some uncertainty in the details of this warning, but some areas could see up to 30 millimetres of rain in just 2 to 3 hours. Gosh, that's enough to get your feet wet. That's all from us for the moment. We're back in half an hour. In the meantime, back to Mark Daubney.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Now, I don't know about you, but Mark White's weather-related commentary fast becoming my favourite part of the show. But before that, let's move on. A motion calling for Labour to reverse its cuts to the winter fuel allowance has been backed by party conference members in a humiliating blow to Sir Keir Starmer.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
And while there's nothing binding at all about that vote, it puts further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from 10 million pensioners. The motion was put forward by the Unite Union. Their General Secretary, Sharon Graham, told GB News the government is embarking on austerity Mark II.
Look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue, it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Well, it's all kicking off in Liverpool. Let's cross now to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who's been at that Labour Party conference in Liverpool.
Yes, this conference season began badly for Keir Starmer. There was an opinion poll on the eve of conference showing that the Prime Minister's popularity ratings have now dropped to -26. That's 1 point lower than the Prime Minister. And it has certainly ended very badly indeed for the Prime Minister. There has been this vote organised by two of the major unions against that winter fuel reversal, which the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer have managed to get through Parliament. So Labour members voting to restore that winter fuel payment to 10 million pensioners. Now, in concrete terms, this doesn't matter very much. It's a symbolic vote. Labour can still push ahead with it. But it does begin to indicate that Keir Starmer might be losing a bit of grip on his party. Now, why is that? You would expect 2 months after this enormous general election victory for Keir Starmer to be extremely in control of the party, but he's not. Part of the reason, I think, for that is that although Labour was very popular in the run-up to the election, partly because the Conservatives were so unpopular, Starmer himself was never that popular. So Labour members and the Labour parliamentary party don't feel as though the Prime Minister sort of won them their seats. They don't feel that sense of gratitude to the Prime Minister. And that means there's not that much loyalty to him. And in the future, going forwards, that could be a bit of a problem.
It's all kicking off, and joining me now to discuss this is the political commentator Peter Spencer. Peter, always a delight to have you on the show, as ever, sitting pretty in pink. Unlike Sir Keir Starmer, the unions are revolting, not for the first time. You have to admit, this is a humiliating blow for the Prime Minister.
Well, just to be really awkward, I wouldn't actually go so far as to say it is a humiliating blow in point of fact. It's not binding. It was very close. Everyone knew there were a large number of Labour delegates and supporters who are deeply uneasy about the winter fuel allowance. And sure enough, we had this vote. But I'm sort of with Sharon, the union leader, on all this when she said this should have been Tuesday, because it was today, as the conference was winding down, half the delegates already on the train back to London. A whole load of the rest of them are probably fiddling with their suitcases, hoping they haven't forgotten anything. And so many times in the past have I driven back from a conference, listening to my carefully crafted payoff piece on the radio and hearing it rather dispiritingly going down the running order, and by the time I actually made it back to London, it had vanished altogether. But don't get me wrong, there are many, many other things that have gone very much awry with this new administration. We have Frockgate and we have Sue Graygate, and I'm glad I managed to say that correctly. I didn't have a sausage moment there. But I'm holding in my hand right now the front cover of the new latest Private Eye, which says Labour in cost of giving crisis. That says it all. It should have been a victory lap, and as it turned out, it was a relatively dispirited thing, above all because of these serious fears. And I go back to Sue Gray here, that there might be something dysfunctional in the running of government, and that has to get sorted out, got to get sorted out soon.
Peter Spencer, you know as well as I know that Sir Keir Starmer pushed this vote back because he knew he'd lose it. He was on a hiding to nothing. He didn't want this to dominate the headlines, and so he shoved it backwards. But aside from this specific moment, Jeremy Corbyn's gone. The rump of the hard left. Sir Keir Starmer is doing his best to make independence and or freeze out. But could this be the beginnings of a fresh problem for Keir Starmer? The unions don't seem to like him much. Sir Keir Starmer's popularity is tanking. He's the least popular Prime Minister in living history. A lot of people saying 60% yesterday, Peter, don't think he'll even be the leader of the Labour Party at the next election. Are the unions revolting? Are they jostling, positioning themselves to perhaps try and take him down?
I don't think they are, but they're certainly, I mean, look, the government had a policy of what they call kitchen sinking, which means chucking all the bad news out into the public domain at the earliest possible moment. And the winter fuel allowance, I would suspect, was a kind of a sort of a warning shot. Look, suck it up, guys, because that's what you're going to have to get used to. And there was a little bit of sort of brightening things up in Keir Starmer's speech and in Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor's speeches at the conference, but there's no question about it. We are going to go through a pretty dire period. We have the budget coming up, which I feel sure will be chock-a-block with pretty miserable news. And what they're trying to do, though, is to lay the groundwork, say, look, it's gloom today, but it could be a jam tomorrow. You know, that's if we play our cards right. But of course, so many of these things, like setting up GB Energy and sorting the planning reform so loads of lovely new homes can be built, it all takes time. And in the meantime, slack is not being cut for Keir Starmer very manifestly. You mentioned those rather dire polling figures, but his hope is, remember, it's a brand new government. He's got 5 years for things to start appearing, and his strategy clearly is to make sure they started appearing and they're sufficiently visible for the punters to sort of cut him some slack and say, okay, he's making some progress. That said, there is the problem of if you like, the Rishi Sunak problem of the tin ear, and that I'm thinking specifically about how Starmer did not manage to bring down the problem of stuff being given to him and his wife and so on, until the story had been running for several days. And there was one particularly disgruntled minister who said on lobby terms to a correspondent, look, you know, it should have been blindingly obvious. He should have addressed this much sooner. That, I think, is his Achilles heel.
And at that point, you just gave us a fresh nickname, Peter Spencer. We've had two-tier Keir, we've had free gear Keir, we had no beer Keir yesterday. Now you give us tin ear Keir. Thank you very much, Peter Spencer. Absolute pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. Thank you. Now, moving on, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has promised to give all military veterans a guaranteed roof over their heads. Now, they will be exempt from local connection tests, which most councils use to decide who can qualify for social housing. But won't our heroes just find themselves at the back of a very long queue? Well, joining us now to discuss this is the former Army veteran and Director of Fundraising at Combat Stress Charity, Robert Marsh. Robert, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on. No doubt, Robert, a lot of people like yourself yesterday went, wow, Homes for Heroes. This sounds absolutely fantastic, the kind of policy we've been waiting for a long time, but we don't know yet much of the detail. In fact, we've put some of this to the Prime Minister. We're showing that exclusively live at 5 o'clock on this channel, so Keir Starmer will answer that specific question. But Robert Marsh, from what you've seen so far, does Homes for Heroes get your backing?
Well, we would welcome any additional help for the veteran population. Our particular swim lane at Combat Stress is mental health, more complex end of mental health, so PTSD with anxiety and depression. So any additional support to the veteran population is to be welcomed. And there's been a recent study by King's that suggests that veterans have there's likely to be 10% of the veteran population who have PTSD, and that's set against a backdrop of 4% in the general population. And homelessness can help to exacerbate some of the problems that veterans face, so makes them more likely to have problems around stress, PTSD, those sorts of things. And it is also an obstacle in seeking help from mental health professionals or getting a GP and all those sorts of things. So, having a home, having work is, a very important aspect of supporting veterans who are suffering this way. So we broadly welcome it.
And Robert, in terms of the magnitude of the issue, I mean, the figures I can see here, there are about 2,300 households in England which are owed a homelessness duty with a member in that group who's previously served in the armed forces. Yet we constantly talk on this channel and elsewhere about the seeming fact that we are housing thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, and veterans often seem at the back of the queue. My question to the Prime Minister later on will be precisely that. Will this guarantee veterans get preferential treatment? Or Robert Marsh, is your data saying, well, you can join the queue, but you won't be given access to the front of the queue?
Well, I'm not an expert in this specific area at all, but I think the announcement yesterday does set the tone, which is that there will be more help for veterans, and we definitely welcome that. And the new Veterans Minister, Alistair Cairns, looks as though he's somebody who wants to make a difference to the veteran population. He served himself. He called a round table of military charities very recently. So he wants to listen from people like Combat Stress who are dealing with veterans day in, day out. So we do welcome this pledge that's been made.
Robert Marsh, I absolutely agree with you, and I really, really hope my cynicism is misplaced. I really, really do. I hope that this does give much-needed support for veterans who deserve the full support of our country before, during and after their service. We'll know the answer to that question around about 5 o'clock today when we play that exclusive interview with the Prime Minister. But until then, thank you very much for joining us. That's Robert Marsh, the Director of Fundraising at Combat Stress Charity and also, of course, an Armed Forces veteran. Thank you for your service. Thank you very much. Now, still to come, is the Middle East on the brink of war? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GB News a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment environment is fantastic, not just professionally, but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z do really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard-working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:24. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Tensions continue to increase in the Middle East as Israel's Iron Dome is forced to intercept missiles fired by Hezbollah. After thousands of pages and walkie-talkies unexpectedly exploded in Lebanon, Israel launched its biggest offensive yet on the country. And now thousands of British nationals in the area are being told to leave immediately. And joining me now to discuss this is the defence analyst, Chris Newton. Chris, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. So things are getting frisky. Not only are Brits being told to leave the area, but we hear 700 British troops being deployed to Cyprus. Tell us, how precipitous is this situation? Should we be concerned about Britain being dragged into a broader confrontation in the Middle East?
Good afternoon. I think the situation is concerning. It's worth saying, first of all, that there has been continuous activity on the Lebanese border ever since the 8th of October. Hezbollah has been firing rockets at Israel ever since then on a daily basis or near daily basis, and Israel has been carrying out attacks as well. The situation has really sort of escalated since July after the Hezbollah attack, where the rocket landed on the football pitch, killing 12 children. But Netanyahu last week has reportedly made a decision to return the civilians, the 80,000 civilians that have been evacuated from the northern Israeli border because of their Hezbollah attacks. And now you're seeing this campaign from Israel, starting with the pager attacks and the attack on detonation of the walkie-talkies. And now you're seeing an intensification of the air campaign as well to target command and control. Those were the targets last week, but this week the targets are key commanders, missile launchers, military infrastructure, and so forth.
And Chris, just to be absolutely certain, with clarity about the British involvement here, so the troops, the 700 British troops that are being deployed to Cyprus, they're not going to be involved in a combat situation, right? They are being deployed to Cyprus to aid the evacuation of Brits and others from the Lebanon area, from the Middle East to Cyprus. Of course, Cyprus is a long-established and recognised military outpost that the United Kingdom and America has in the area as the nearest vantage point, as it were. So there's no implication whatsoever that British troops are actually physically getting involved in any armed conflict.
No, I mean, this is, this is initially kind of preparation for any kind of evacuation operation that might have to take place, if the situation gets even more intense. But the government's advice is to leave Lebanon, and the planning at the moment, or the expectation, is that people would adhere to that advice. And there's no question of Britain, getting involved in this operation in a combat sense. Now, there may be risks in terms of an evacuation operation, but in terms of getting involved in combat or in the fighting, there's no question of that. Certainly at the moment.
Chris, just to sort of be clear, again, with echoes of history, the evacuation of Afghanistan, the aftermath of that, the political aftermath, the humanitarian disaster, the aftermath of that, both for Joe Biden and for, at the time, Boris Johnson. This is a situation of there might be a lot of people getting out of the area that need our immediate attention. Cyprus is the most geographically sensible place to do that from, to process from, but it does send out a message, nevertheless, though, that we are helping not only our own citizens, but we are standing with Israel, which is the key message to send out.
Yeah, and certainly that's the case. As you said, there's no question of us getting involved militarily, but the priority at the moment in terms of the British government is the safety of British citizens. And that's the key priority, and that's why the government has issued their advice. And certainly, we hope that the government, continues to stand with Israel on this, despite its policy on arms and so forth in relation to Gaza. But yes, it's important to stress that our concern at the moment, at least from a British perspective, is our British nationals in Lebanon at the moment, and not the wider conflict in terms of the use of our assets. Obviously, there's a diplomatic concern from our perspective with regards to escalation of the conflict, but our concern in terms of the use of any British assets is our citizens and getting our citizens out of Lebanon.
And Chris Newton, there have been some spectacular videos of those Israeli bombs hitting residential areas in Lebanon with spectacular after explosions, the aftermath. And of course, Chris Newton, many defence analysts and experts pointing out this is because huge amounts of arsenal, explosive devices being stored by Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so we've seen some huge explosions, and that is because their arsenal, their capabilities are being taken down. But of course, Hezbollah are saying this is an attack on a civilian area, as we've heard many, many times from Gaza. But Chris Newton, as far as you're concerned, this is the necessary manoeuvre to take out the capabilities of a terrorist organisation.
Yes, I mean, the Israelis, the Israeli Defense Forces, they have been clear in saying that this is, a military operation aimed at the missile launchers and the various weaponry and the storage facilities. As far as we can see, that's happening. And you're right, Hezbollah contains an extensive rocket, missile and drone arsenal, around about 100 to 150,000 projectiles. So, and as I've said at the beginning, these weapons are being used against Israel on a daily basis, and you cannot blame Israel for taking the operation, for taking the action that it's been taken. So that's what we're seeing. And obviously, this is going to, they can't take out, the vast majority of the capability, but they're degrading the capability, and they're making it more difficult for Hezbollah to conduct operations in the future.
Great. So, expert analysis. Thank you very much. That's the defence analyst, Chris Newton. Thanks for joining me here on GB News. Thank you. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including can Labour finally fix the NHS? Well, Health Secretary Wes Streeting has set himself quite a challenge as he's guaranteed to the nation that he will cut those waiting lists. Could it be his I'll stop the boat moment? I'll have that all to follow, but first, here's your headlines, and it's Mark White.
Good afternoon. At 3:32, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. The government has reaffirmed its intention to cut the winter fuel allowance, despite a vote at the Labour Party conference to reverse the controversial move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Although the vote isn't binding, it does put further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The Prime Minister is at the centre of fresh controversy over a decision to accept several weeks' accommodation at a luxury property in London. The accommodation, worth more than £20,000, was made available by Labour donor Lord Ali. Sir Keir defended his decision to accept the offer because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs and said the family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. He insisted he wouldn't apologise as he'd done nothing wrong. The government has told Britons in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus. They'll oversee any plans for emergency evacuations. Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. The terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a missile targeting Mossad headquarters. Hezbollah claims the intelligence agency is responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon. The Prime Minister in New York at the United Nations Security Council said the government is ramping up its contingency plans in light of the escalating situation. The Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Metropolitan Police Sergeant Matt Ratana. Sergeant Ratana, who was nearing retirement after 30 years' service, was shot and killed in a police custody centre in South London 4 years ago. Sergeant Ratana's killer, Luis de Souza, is serving life in prison after he'd managed to smuggle a gun into the custody suite. Although officers arrested him on drugs charges and possession of ammunition, they failed to discover the weapon in an underarm holster. Well, the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has paid tribute to the fallen sergeant.
The impact of Matt's death reverberated across the Met and across policing in London and UK and the world, not least because of his own global connections. He's often referred to as a larger-than-life character, leaving behind his presence in all he met, in all he touched.
Philip Schofield is returning to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on the Channel 5 show Castaway. The programme's producers have already released a promotional video of the 62-year-old as he told his followers on Instagram, "Now you know how I spent my summer, alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." Well, Schofield resigned from ITV last May after he admitted an affair with a younger male colleague. And finally, a new weather warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, which could cause further widespread flooding and travel disruption. The yellow warning's been issued for much of England and Wales, parts of the West Midlands and the northwest of England between 5 p.m. tomorrow and 10 a.m. on Friday. The Met Office says there's some uncertainty in the details of this warning, but some areas could see up to 30 millimetres of rain in just 2 to 3 hours. So the perfect weather for sailing down your local high street. OK, back to Martin Daubney now.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Mark White, your weather comments are sailing their way into my heart. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, you know what to do. gbnews.com/your say. And I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. And stick around, we've got an amazing exclusive with Sir Keir Starmer. We put it to him, will veterans really get preferential treatment in the Homes for Heroes scheme? You'll not want to miss it. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp. And the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid-Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter but chilly.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. West Yorkshire, there's a breakdown on the westbound M621. It's from Sturton through towards Belle Isle Road. That's junction 7 to the junction 6 turn-off. A lane is blocked. Still very slow on the southbound M5 in the West Midlands. Now 2 lanes are out junction 2, Oldbury and Dudley. Down towards Birmingham at junction 3. A collision there causing queues back to Birmingham and West Bromwich at junction 1. The routes around Oldbury and Smethwick also slow as, of course, traffic seeks an alternative. Milton and Oxfordshire, the A4130 from the Milton interchange of the A34 to Didcot at Station Road. Part blocked and slow. There's a collision. And still the northbound M1 struggling. A lane closed on the exit slip coming off at Hemel Hempstead at junction 8. There's a police incident causing queues on all approaches. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:41. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, the Health Secretary has admitted that the NHS is broken again, but has vowed not to give up on it. Instead, he's guaranteed waiting lists will be cut, and by getting hospitals running like a Formula One pit stop. Well, are you convinced? Well, here is Mr. Streeting in action.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear. But if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
Well, it's fantastic rhetoric, but is there any substance behind it? Joining me now is the former Chief Executive Officer of the Royal College of Nursing, Dr. Peter Carter, OBE. Thank you very, very much for joining us today, Dr. Carter. So we've heard for goodness knows how many years that the NHS is broken. Wes Streeting, however, seems to be the most determined health minister of them all to tackle this crisis. Of course, in doing so, he will face opposition from both the political left and the political right. And the question there is he prepared to do what's necessary? And is that a mixture, in your eyes, the best solution, the best diagnosis, the best medicine for the NHS, part private, part nationalised? Is that the way we should do it?
Well, we all want Wes Streeting to succeed. I disagree with using the blanket statement that the NHS is broken. There are parts of the NHS where things are pretty desperate. A&E, delayed discharges, waiting lists. And Ara Darzi, who was commissioned by Wes Streeting to carry out an inquiry, has published that. And Ara Darzi makes the point that the NHS has to change, that things are not in a good state in many places. But he did make the point that it does need investment. Now, I know there's always a danger that people think we just can't keep throwing money at it. And we can't keep throwing money at it. It has to spend its existing money more wisely, and any new investment has to be spent wisely. Now, if I can, because I don't know how long we've got, but I'll just give you one example. Wes Streeting, as I say, I want the man to succeed. He said that he was ashamed of our maternity services. Well, we know that in some areas there have been major problems with maternity services, and some of the things that we've heard about are unforgivable. But we do have some amazing obstetricians and wonderful midwives, and the UK is still one of the safest places in the world to have a baby. Now, if you've lost your baby under circumstances which they ought not to have been, that's not going to be any consolation to you, and we want those people investigated, and if people are culpable, they have to be held to account. But I don't think it's helpful to make these sweeping statements. So we'll have to see in the long term whether or not his diagnosis and his prescription is the right treatment plan to turn the NHS around.
But Dr. Carter, there has been so much rhetoric about it's broken and he's fixing. Now we're down to the actual coalface of how that's best implemented. And back to my point, a lot of people have been saying, why not go down a Danish route, an Australian route? Those who can afford to opt out and pay for private insurance should be encouraged to do so, to free up the space, the beds, the treatment capacity for those who cannot. Yet, Dr. Carter, that will surely put him at loggerheads with the nursing unions, with the GP unions. And so will the political left allow him to be the moderniser we suspect he probably would like to be?
Well, the NHS, Nigel Lawson famously said, it's the nearest thing the British have got to a religion. And it is a fact, when somebody tries to touch it or to change it for the good, there's an outcry right across the piece. Now, the fact is, if you do go down a route where people have to pay, partly as they do in countries like Ireland, France, and many others, I don't have a problem with that. As long as people accept, you will have to pay more. I mean, that is the issue. Now, in many of those countries, people say, well, I don't mind paying more because I'm actually getting a faster and a better treatment. But it's not going to be a panacea to cure all its ills. What I would say is that nothing should be off the table. Let's have a look at it. But I still think it's an NHS that's got far more going for it than people would realise, again, because of years and years of underfunding. And by the way, it's been over successive parties that there have been problems. We now have these massive waiting lists, which were unforeseen. Ara Darzi also talked about £37.5 billion worth of backlog maintenance and buildings that need to be repaired. And if you look at, say, I've mentioned maternity services once before, in many of those services, the equipment, the building stock, the staffing levels are far inferior to those of comparable countries. So I'm afraid if the government wanted to do something about it, which I want to support them to do it, they've got to have a plan, they've got to have the detail, and then they've got to have the courage to follow it through.
Expert analysis. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's the former Chief Executive Officer of the Royal College of Nursing, Dr. Peter Carter. Thank you. Now, Shane presenter Philip Schofield is set to return to our TV screens in a new game show where he's stranded alone on a desert island. Does he deserve a comeback? Or should we just do us all a favour and stay on the island? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
But let's get stuck in. Prince Harry, he's consulted former aides about a possible partial return to the UK as he seeks to repair his public image, that is according to the Daily Mail.
Who wants him? I'm sorry. This is, of course, he's got his book Spare.
Yeah,
the paperback comes out later this year. Now, he's not updating it, but he'll want to promote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He says he's not doing any interviews, but we're talking about him now, we're talking about Spare.
Yeah.
And is he going to come back with his wife? What about the children? Because apparently it's not safe for his wife and children in this country, according to Harry, even though he took his wife to Colombia, which is much less safe than Britain, in my view.
It's absurd. No, anyway, he was able to attend his uncle's funeral quite easily.
He did.
Nobody knew he was coming. He said
That's
he wasn't, and then he did. And he was perfectly safe.
And he would have had the same security as every other member of the royal family who attended that event.
Yeah.
But, of course, he didn't speak to his brother at the funeral.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
So if he's trying to fix it, honestly, a funeral is where you should put all differences aside.
Yeah.
Because it's not about you, it's about respect to the person, the family of the person who's gone, which was his uncle. It was his... Diana's sister's husband had died. So, yet they didn't speak. They didn't speak in the church, they didn't speak when they left the church. Incredible, isn't it?
It's awful because that moment is when you realise that we are all mortal. And at that point, all other things should transcend that, but not...
Well, this move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In From the Cold, because apparently he's a bit fed up with his life in Montecito. Does that mean with his wife?
I don't know.
Oh, no. Apparently he's dissatisfied with advice from his American-based image expert.
Well, they've had about 10 of them, haven't they? They're on to their number 11.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Philip Schofield, the disgraced TV presenter, has broken his silence on his TV return after announcing he will star in his own survival show on Channel 5. He'll be marooned on a remote island off Madagascar for 10 days, soul-searching. As you can see him there, wandering around. He hasn't been seen on our screen, of course, for over a year, 16 months, in fact, after admitting to having a relationship with a much younger male colleague. Well, does he deserve a comeback, or should we just leave him on that lonely island to think the rest of his life through? Joining me now is the publicity coach, Maya Riaz. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So that's the big question. 16 months. Is it too soon? Do we want Philip Schofield back on our screens? Why is he back?
There's so many questions here. First of all, I believe everyone deserves a chance. There's a difference whether we want him or not, and that's the big question on Monday, how the public will respond to his comeback. This has been long anticipated. We saw him slowly but very cleverly make his comeback on Instagram in May, albeit he disabled all his comments just to get a feedback of what it was like. And now there was a rumoured comeback. Many of us in the industry expected it to be a big, explosive interview with the likes of Piers Morgan. I think he's been very clever in the way he has chosen Castaway as his platform to come back, because as you said, Martin, he's on his own on a desert island. Nobody's questioning him. No one's challenging him. And in his own words, what he has done is unwise, not illegal. So I think there is two camps, whether people want him back and he deserves a second chance, and secondly, how that will be received. Because at the end of the day, he can't work in a checkout or in a call centre. TV is all this guy knows, and this is his way of comeback.
Yeah, but you can't be short of a few, Bob. I mean, he was earning absolutely packets for years. Why can't he just, I don't know, go and play golf and retire quietly? Why does he have to come back on our screens? Is it just vanity? Is it addicted to fame?
It's all he knows, isn't it, right? We've all grown up with him, so it's all he knows. He probably has been playing golf and doing other things, and now after a whole year, or longer than a year, as you said, Martin, he feels that he's ready to take the criticism of the public as well as the industry and see what's happening. And at the end of the day, you know, he would be worth millions, but he's probably used to a lavish lifestyle and still needs to earn a living. I think the important thing is how he integrates himself back into the industry. Is he going to be getting his presenting roles back? Is he going to showbiz events? Or is this just a one-off and then he's off again?
OK, well, maybe he might just stay on the island. Maybe that's the best place for him. Thank you very much for joining us, Maya Riaz. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Now, coming up, our political editor, Chris Hope, has a stonking exclusive interview with Sir Keir Starmer. The big question we asked, will Homes for Heroes really put veterans first, or is it just window dressing? You will not want to miss that interview. And does Keir Starmer regret that sausages howler? Certainly been a banger for us. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. That's your weather. Here's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp. And the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid-Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
the latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. To Cumbria, high scales. The A596 is currently shut between Heathfield and Gilmore End Brow. There's a police incident there. Diversions use the A595. That's busier than normal. Flooding in Kempston in Bedfordshire means the A421 remains shut between the A6 at the Marshall Age roundabout and the M1 at junction 13. If you're heading towards Bedfordshire, the A1, the high road northbound from the Beeston turnoff up towards the Sandy roundabout in Sandy, there's flooding there as well, blocking a lane. That's looking quite busy. Southbound A1M quite slow too. There was a bump on the exit slip coming off towards the M25, junction 1 South Mims. That's cleared. It's still busy though. And over to Devon in Tiverton, St Paul Street, that remains shut between Bridge Street and Great Western Way for the A396. A collision there being investigated. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's an incredible £36,000 to be won in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having an extra £3,000 each month to play with. And because it's totally tax-free, you get to keep every penny and spend it however you like. We could be paying for your entire year until 2025. How amazing would that be? For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK.
Stay to winter fuel! Stay to winter fuel! Stay to winter fuel!
Unions are revolting. Sir Keir Starmer suffered an humiliating defeat when his union paymasters voted to keep the winter fuel allowance. Is this the beginnings of a left-wing revolution, a plot to topple Starmer, who's rapidly becoming the least popular Prime Minister in recent history? And yesterday, Keir Starmer's new Homes for Heroes policy won the backing of patriotic Brits. But does it really prioritise armed forces veterans, or could they still find themselves behind asylum seekers at the back of the queue? We put that question to the Prime Minister because GB News' political editor Chris Hope today sat down with the Prime Minister in New York, and we dared to ask him the questions that others simply dodge. For example, will Homes for Heroes really put our veterans first? Is it time to stop calling protesters racist? And does he regret that silly sausage howler? Welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. We're about to cross live to Chris Hope in New York. He sat down with the Prime Minister earlier on and asked some fantastic questions. We've got a cracking exclusive for you in about an hour's time. You'll not want to miss it. Trust me, it's an absolutely top drawer story from Chris Hope. Get in touch the usual ways. We're about to cross to him. Get in touch with me, gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your headlines. Mark White.
Good afternoon. At just after 4 o'clock, the latest news from the GB News Centre. The Prime Minister has told British nationals in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus. While speaking before addressing the United Nations Security Council, he said the extra troops would oversee any evacuation.
A very important message for British nationals in Lebanon, which is the time to leave is now. The contingency plans are being ramped up, but don't wait for those. There are still commercial flights. It's very important that they hear my message, which is to leave and to leave immediately.
Well, warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. The terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a missile targeting Mossad headquarters. Hezbollah claims the intelligence agency is responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon. The Prime Minister is at the centre of fresh controversy over a decision to accept several weeks' accommodation at a luxury property in London. The accommodation, worth more than £20,000, was made available by Labour donor Lord Ali. Sir Keir defended his decision to accept the offer because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs and said the family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. He insisted that he wouldn't apologise as he'd done nothing wrong. Well, the government has reaffirmed its intention to cut the winter fuel allowance despite a vote at the Labour Party conference to reverse the controversial move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Although the vote isn't binding, it does put further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. Unite's General Secretary Sharon Graham told GB News she was disappointed the vote was moved to the very end of conference.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Well, meanwhile, the Health Secretary has told the conference on its fourth and final day that the NHS is letting people down, and he promised to defend it as a public service.
I know the doctor's diagnosis can sometimes be hard to hear, but if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you won't provide the correct prescription. And when you put protecting the reputation of the NHS above protecting patients, you're not helping the NHS, you're killing it with kindness. So I say respectfully, but unequivocally, I won't back down. The NHS is broken, but it's not beaten, and together we will turn it around.
The Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Metropolitan Police Sergeant Matt Ratana. Sergeant Ratana, who was nearing retirement after 30 years' service, was shot and killed in a police custody centre in South London 4 years ago. Sergeant Ratana's killer, Louise de Souza, is serving life in prison after he'd managed to smuggle a gun into the custody suite. Although officers arrested him on drugs charges and possessing ammunition, they failed to discover the weapon in an underarm holster. Well, the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, paid tribute at the memorial service.
The impact of Matt's death reverberated across the Met and across policing in London and UK, 'and UK, and the world, not least because of his own global connections. 'Connections. 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 ' He's often referred to as a larger-than-life character, leaving behind his presence in all he met, in all he touched.
Philip Schofield is returning to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on the Channel 5 show Castaway. The programme's producers released a promotional video as the 62-year-old told his followers on Instagram, "Now you know how I spent my summer, alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." Well, Schofield resigned from ITV last May after he admitted an affair with a younger male colleague. And finally, a new weather warning of heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, which could cause further widespread flooding and travel disruption. The yellow warning's been issued for much of England and Wales, parts of the West Midlands and the northwest of England between 5 p.m. tomorrow and 10 a.m. on Friday. The Met Office says there's some uncertainty in the details of this warning, but some areas could see up to 30 millimetres of rain in just 3 hours. There you go, you're right up to date with your news and your weather. Now someone who always goes down a storm, Martin Daubney.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, Mark White, thank you for that thunderous reaction. So Sir Keir Starmer has left the Labour Party conference to join world leaders at the United Nations in the United States to deliver his first speech as Prime Minister. We'll be bringing you that live in just under an hour's time. But now let's go live to New York now and visit and to speak to our GB News political editor, Chris Hope, who is there for us. Chris, welcome to the show. There you are on the banks of the River Hudson, I believe. So Sir Keir Starmer sailed away from the conference, but there was bad news for him there. The unions revolted. They voted against his winter fuel vote, a humiliating exit. So let's first talk about that. Then let's talk about what we can expect today. And then tell us about the cracking exclusive you got for us later in the show.
That's right, Martin. Well, welcome to New York City, the banks of the Hudson. If I'll just show you around where we are, this is the Hudson, and Ben can still around. Behind me here, you'll see the UN building, this enormous building here, where we're seeing Sir Keir Starmer go to his first Security Council meeting shortly to discuss the escalating problems in Lebanon, the evacuation of Brits, all Brits told to leave there. And then we're all, because of the concerns about Israel, there might be some meetings with President Zelensky, this idea of a victory plan to try and drive home what might be a victory for Ukraine in their war with Russia. So it's all happening here. We're on the banks of a river, the River Hudson, but it's a bit similar to the River Mersey, where I was just yesterday. We heard from Sir Keir Starmer, of course. He suffered quite a humiliating defeat from his own members there, voting down the government's plan, in fact now a law, to axe the winter fuel payment. That's been an issue for this government. We'll hear more from Sir Keir Starmer on that at 5 o'clock. And also, I thought, a change in tone in his speech yesterday, which might be welcomed by GB News viewers. He talked about controlling immigration. He also talked about the fact you can discuss concerns about net migration, and that's fine by this Labour government. It's a language we haven't heard really from this government. We've been talking about it. A lot of viewers, listeners are concerned about it, and maybe, just maybe, this government is listening to those concerns, Martin.
Is that the case, though, Chris, or, as usual with politicians, is it window dressing? I know you're going to ask him some pertinent questions on that later on, but how do you think the conference went? It started badly with the Free Gear Kia scandal, with the cronyism. It ended badly with this revolt. Wes Streeting delivered a bit of a barnstorming speech on the NHS, perhaps positioning himself as somebody that all eyes are on. And is this backlash, the union backlash today, Chris, does it have any significance? Unite, the CWU, the Trade Union Congress, of course. These are the major vehicles of the opponents now, of the political left. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has been ushered into history. Could the unions, could the left be a problem for Sir Keir Starmer later on? Might they be revolting against him? His popularity is tanking. Could they come back to haunt him?
Well, they're certainly important because they donate heavily to the party. They're the Labour Party's paymasters, and if you start getting at odds with unions, that's always a bad look. And so early also in this time in government. I mean, Tony Blair fell out with his union supporters over a few years, but not within 10 or 12 weeks. It's definitely a big worry, I think. And of course, Sharon Graham, the Unite leader, that one of the biggest paymasters for Labour, they didn't sign off on that manifesto and also didn't approve, of course, clearly, because they led the rebellion today against that winter fuel payment. It is a worry, I think, for this Labour government. They're setting themselves against their core support. And I wonder whether, you know, the suggestion of austerity, they say they were not keen on austerity, but we heard, didn't we, from Sir Keir Starmer saying we're all in it together in his speech, exactly the same language used by George Osborne in those years 2010, 11, 12, when he forced that austerity onto the country. And of course the government says no plans to return to that. So it's a worry, I think, for them. But he's escaped the drama of Liverpool to be here in New York. I should say he did speak earlier to cameras, and we should play that now, about why the government wants Britons out of Lebanon as soon as possible. Concerned Sir Keir Starmer, he's given an instruction to Brits to leave Lebanon. I think that's a worry, I think, going forward, and that's why I think that a lot of the focus of the Security Council meeting at 5 o'clock will be that big issue.
And Chris, I know you've got to dash off in a moment to get inside that speech there. Keir Starmer expected you have to clear security. What can we expect, you think, today from Keir Starmer at the UN?
Yes, as I was saying there, the big concern here, there's two big issues here facing the UK at the moment. The most pressing one is Britons in Lebanon. They've got to be told to leave immediately by the UK government, because as the fighting between Hezbollah fighters in southern Lebanon and Israeli troops gets worse and worse. We're seeing images on our screens at GBNews of people fleeing that area. That's the first concern. The second concern is there's a quiet pressure on the US and UK to agree more support for Ukraine, a so-called victory plan mapped out by President Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader. He is here in New York. He's trying to meet and get the support of Joe Biden. Of course, he's now a lame duck president. He'll be out of power effectively within 7 weeks, although he leaves office early next year. And they want to somehow get the US to agree to this plan and try and push on forward, almost a legacy issue for Joe Biden. But equally, the concerns is that if Donald Trump wins the election, which is very possible given how tight the polls are, then there could be pressure on Ukraine to sue for a peace deal with Russia, which Ukraine may not want. So we're the two competing priorities, and it's never quiet when you're the Prime Minister of the UK. You can have battles at home and big battles abroad.
OK, Chris, so we're going to let you go now. I know you need to get inside the UN there to get a ringside seat for the Prime Minister at 5 o'clock. And we'll speak to you again in the next hour about your cracking exclusive. Chris Hope there, live from New York. Thank you very, very much. Chris got a dash. Now, moving on, a motion calling for Labour to reverse its cuts to the winter fuel allowance, as we've been discussing, has been backed by party conference members in a humiliating blow to Sir Keir Starmer.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
And of course, while there's nothing binding about that vote, it does put further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from 10 million British pensioners. And the motion was put forward by the Unite Union, and their General Secretary, Sharon Graham, told GB News the government is embarking on austerity Mark II.
Well, look, I think this vote should have happened on Tuesday. I mean, the vote was down under the economy debate on Tuesday, and I think it is disrespectful to the issue that we weren't hearing that vote earlier on under the economy debate. Look, the reality here is that they're going to have to reverse this allowance in terms of putting it back into the pockets of pensioners, and we're asking them to do that. I disagree with what the Prime Minister is saying on this. I'm really glad we've got a Labour government. I think Britain is better off with a Labour government, but on this issue, it is a huge misstep, and he needs to change what he has done. And I think the country out there, it's not really what happens in this hall that's important, it's what's happening there in the real world. They are furious about it.
Well, Unite are furious, and let's go live now to the spokesperson for Fuel Poverty Action, Jonathan Bean. Jonathan, welcome to the show. So we can see there the unions are furious. Are you furious about the fact that even though the unions stood up to the Labour Party and voted this motion down, it's not binding, this will still be the law of the land? 10 million pensioners will not begin their winter fuel allowance this winter. What's your thoughts?
Well, yes. I mean, the British public are furious, and millions of pensioners actually terrified going into this winter. It's very obvious to everyone that Rachel Reeves made a terrible mistake. And it's very clear also that they intend to kind of look tough and stick with this mistake and try and pretend there's not an issue, regardless of the impact on public confidence in terms of the number of deaths and the impact this is going to have on the NHS.
Do you find it astonishing still, all these weeks on, as many of us do, Jonathan Bean, that despite the fact the Labour Party were briefing themselves in 2017 that we could see 4,000 deaths if the Conservative government of the time, and Theresa May, got rid of the winter fuel allowance, they pressed on and did it anyway? And the saving of £1.4 billion today, we find there could be 50 billion quid they found down the back of the sofa at Downing Street. Do you think there's an element here of tin-eared Keir Starmer? He hasn't listened to pensioners. He's pressed on with this, despite the fact it seems to me, in my opinion, to be one of the most unpopular things the Prime Minister has done in living memory.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously not listening to the British public. He's not listening to charities. He's not listening to fuel poverty experts. He's now not listening to his own members. So really, we're now terrified. It's very clear they're not going to change. We're looking at 2 million low-income pensioners being potentially without heating this winter, and a huge impact on the NHS. We've got fuel prices going up. They're going to be 65% above what they were in 2020. So it's a really serious situation. Standing charges are double what they were. And this lifeline has been taken away. And pensioners are the last people you want to be switching off their heating in winter. That's just going to have huge impacts on the NHS.
And Jonathan, you're obviously hearing from many, many pensioners out there who have grave concerns. Do you think they'll forget this in a hurry? Do you think this is something that will live with them for a long time? Politicians, I think people have 5-minute memories. Oh, they won't care. In a few months' time, they'll have moved on. We'll be talking about something different. But if this is a matter, as you say, Jonathan Bean, of life and death, do you think pensioners might remember this when they head to the polling booths next time?
Well, I would actually be more worried whether people are going to survive this. I mean, we are going to lose thousands of pensioners as a result of this decision. And many will end up getting sick. And pensioners may not always vote for Labour, but they have families, and their families are also extremely worried. We need an energy system where people can afford to put their heating on and stay safe and don't end up getting sick and don't end up dying, which is why we've proposed something called Energy for All, which would guarantee everyone the essential energy to stay warm. And we're taking this to number 10 next week, and we really hope that Keir Starmer will start listening and taking the action to save lives and save the NHS.
And Jonathan Bean, when you're down at Downing Street, please come and see us here at GB News. We're just around the corner. We'd love to do all we can to support you. And in the meantime, if people want to support Fuel Poverty Action, what do? How can they get in touch?
Well, yeah, go onto our website. We have the petition. We have 660,000 people that have signed the proposal for Energy for All. We have many people also campaigning against standing charges. So yeah, please go on our website, Energy for All, and also Fuel Poverty Action. We have 2 websites, and please, get involved in actions both aimed at the government and also Ofgem, who are currently refusing to get rid of standing charges. So yeah, there's lots of battles still to happen this winter. We just hope that people will start listening and some positive change can happen.
Well, Jonathan Bean at Fuel Poverty Action, you're doing God's work. Please keep going, and please come and see us when you're down in London. Thank you very, very much for joining us today on GB News. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you. Now, France is to expel illegal immigrants who have broken into the country. Or should we take a leaf out of their book? I think so. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I agree that sometimes a child does need that little break for mental space. If your child's not as academic as other children, school lessons can be quite overwhelming. I went into a maths lesson actually and watched the other day, and it was so... I didn't understand it, so I don't know how they cope. So I think that it's not bad to let your child have a lazy day once in a blue moon. I'm not saying have lazy days here, there and everywhere, but it can be good to mental rest and stress relief, and it can get their brains recharged, ready for the next day. Because I've had calls from schools before where my daughter's been very overwhelmed and played up at school. So I've even said to the teachers, you know, I'm going to give you a break tomorrow, I'm going to have her off, recharge her little brain, and then I'll send her back in and she'll have a much better day learning. So that's my view on it.
But shouldn't we be teaching children perseverance, that you have to keep going even when you don't feel like it?
Yes, I agree with that, but you can do that at home. I mean, in a work environment, it's different because you choose to do that job. But if you're in a school environment, there's subjects there that children aren't necessarily interested in, and it can be a little bit boring for them with the subjects they don't want to learn. But I think that it's OK to let them have a lazy day off.
OK.
Just one in a blue moon. I'm not saying take lots, but if my child's worked really hard and they've done weeks and weeks of education, they've done well, their brain's a little bit overwhelmed, then I say have a little rest day, recharge your batteries and then get back in school the next day where you'll be learning more rather than playing up and being stressed.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:24. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. France's new Interior Minister has pledged to expel illegal immigrants who have, quote, broken into the country, amid moves aimed at toughening law and order. It's an astonishing development, and joining me now to discuss this is the journalist and broadcaster from Paris, Peter Allen, joining us live on GB News. Peter, welcome to the show. Always a delight. This is an astonishing development. France has gone full Farage. In fact, they've gone one further. And this is President Macron's new Interior Minister pledging to expel illegal immigrants who have broken into the country illegally. Let's start with that bit. Broken in illegally. What does he mean?
Well, effectively, Martin, he means that France, an immigrant nation, one that has clearly been full of migration for centuries. The problem of undocumented migrants is seen as a very large one here in France, and it has been for a long time. And what we effectively have here is a new interior minister who's got the job pretty unexpectedly, I have to say. He's not a member of Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party, as you pointed out there, Martin. He's a Republican. This is a right-wing party, a Conservative party, probably pretty similar to the British Conservatives. They're a minority party at the moment. He isn't even in the National Assembly, which is the French equivalent of the House of Commons. He's in the Senate. And Bruno Retailleau, effectively, he is laying out his stall. He's saying that this problem is still here with too many undocumented people in the country, and he is calling a meeting of around 10 prefects from the 10 regions of France, which are most affected by the problem of mass undocumented migration, and is saying that he is going to do something about it. He's using the kind of discourse that you'd expect of somebody like him, but what he's a little bit short of is specific policy. He is saying that he wants to work more closely with the European Commission, with other EU nations to sort out this problem. But we should be getting specifics at a later date. We would expect that. But at the moment, as I say, he's just laying out his straw, really. He's saying that he's going to be an interior minister who clamps down on migrants, and he is encouraging the EU to support him in that, Martin.
And that, Peter Allen, we all know is where he's going to run into trouble, because he's going to start headbutting Brussels. They're going to push back, as they did with Germany, that recently vowed to close its entire land borders with all of the nations around it. What he means is if you're coming in illegally, it means you're coming in without documents, and therefore you're going to be expelled. Well, that's precisely what many people in the United Kingdom would like us to do. But, of course, that would mean us sending them back to France. So maybe downstream, if this is nipped in the bud, as it were, in France, there might be less of a through flow to our borders. And isn't it astonishing, Peter Allen, that Michel Barnier is the new Prime Minister of France, right? This guy was the godfather of Schengen, the godfather of open borders, until he got elected, and then he realised, actually, the electorate have concerns like radical Islam, the importation of huge amounts of drugs, armaments, violence against police. Finally, could we see some common sense politics in France, or do you expect massive pushback?
I think we should expect massive pushback, Martin. I think that's the honest answer. France is, of course, one of the leading lights of the EU project. It's a country that is led by a massive Europhile in Emmanuel Macron. His first loyalty in many ways is the EU, and he will be doing exactly what they tell them. We have a situation where the largest political grouping in the National Assembly is a left-wing one. They haven't produced a single minister because Emmanuel Macron's not allowing that. They're extremely angry that the most right-wing government in a long time has been chosen. Remember, it's not really functioning yet. It hasn't actually started doing much. And there's always the chance of no confidence votes as well. So this new Interior Minister, Retailleau, he has to look up to all this opposition while trying to deal with a problem that has been around not just for years and decades, but for centuries. Again, France is a massive immigrant nation, far more so than the UK, really. It's got 10 borders with other countries, very close, clearly to Africa, and has very strong links with Southeast Asia and the likes, lots of links with countries that it colonized over many, many years. So the idea that this Interior Minister is going to come in and try and sort all these problems out with all this massive opposition that he's going to be up against, to add to everything we've discussed so far, the European Union, European Commission, a parliament that's not going to be on his side. You, of course, have the courts. The courts here have been very strong, as they have been in Britain, for standing up for human rights and the like, and stopping people from being deported. I've seen, while I've been in France, many attempts to deport individuals from France. It doesn't generally work. They tend to come back.
And yet, Peter Allen, he said at his first cabinet meeting on Monday, I have three priorities. The first is to restore order. The second is to restore order. And the third, you've guessed it, is to restore order. Education, education, education. This guy is talking a good fight. Is that just a political gesture to try and muzzle the likes of Le Pen, to muzzle the far right in France? Really, he's got no teeth. It's all performative.
I think rather than muzzling the ranks of people like Marine Le Pen, he wants to join the ranks of people like Marine Le Pen. And they are all very similar politicians. They talk a good game. They come out with slogans. If you perhaps suggested there, that one he probably stole off Tony Blair and just changed the word. But that, he does that very well. The previous interior ministers have included people like Nicolas Sarkozy. He had all kinds of slogans as well. He used to say things like, I'm going to use a power hose to get rid of the scum. This kind of very reactionary rhetoric, which is very popular amongst those kind of politicians. There's a lot of them in France at the moment. He, as you quite rightly say, Martin, he's the first one in a while that has been in a pretty strong position. But is he going to make a huge difference? I personally don't think he will.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you, as ever, for joining us from Paris. That's Peter Allen. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. I'll be speaking to Ben Habib, the Deputy of Reform, the former Deputy of Reform UK, on whether Labour are taking immigration seriously enough. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Mark White.
Good afternoon. At 4:32, the latest news from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has told British nationals in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus. Speaking before addressing the United Nations Security Council, Sir Keir said the extra troops would oversee any evacuation.
A very important message for British nationals in Lebanon, which is the time to leave is now. The contingency plans are being ramped up, but don't wait for those. There are still commercial flights. It's very important that they hear my message, which is to leave and to leave immediately.
Warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. The terror group Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a missile targeting Mossad headquarters. Hezbollah claims the intelligence agency is responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon. The Prime Minister is at the centre of fresh controversy over a decision to accept several weeks' accommodation at a luxury property in London. The accommodation was made available by Labour donor Lord Ali, and the stay was valued at around £20,000. Also, Keir defended his decision to accept the offer, saying it was because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs. He said the family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. The government has reaffirmed its intention to cut the winter fuel allowance despite a vote at the Labour Party conference to reverse the controversial move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Although the vote isn't binding, it does put further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. The Police Memorial Trust has unveiled a specially commissioned memorial stone dedicated to the memory of Metropolitan Police Sergeant Matt Ratana. Sergeant Ratana, who was nearing retirement after 30 years' service, was shot and killed in a police custody centre in South London 4 years ago. Sergeant Ratana's killer, Luis de Souza, is serving life in prison after he managed to smuggle a gun into the custody suite. Although officers arrested him on drugs charges and possessing ammunition, they failed to discover the weapon in an underarm holster. Philip Schofield is returning to television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on the Channel 5 show Castaway. The programme's producers released this promotional video as the 62-year-old told his followers on Instagram, "Now you know how I spent my summer. Alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." Well, Schofield resigned from ITV last May after he admitted an affair with a younger male colleague. Well, that's it. You're right up to date with the latest headlines. Now it's back to Martin Daubney.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp. And the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid-Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter but chilly.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Still issues in Cumbria between High Scales and Heathfield. The A596 remains closed off. There's an ongoing police incident. The diversion there is via the A595, so that's busier than normal. Eastbound M62, Birchwood at 11 through towards the M60, the Eccles interchange at junction 12. Now there's a breakdown there blocking a lane. It's slow going. Queues in Suffolk, westbound A14 from the west at interchange junction 56 to the Copdock interchange of 55. Reports coming in of an accident looking slow going. Still flooding in Bedfordshire. The A421 between the Marshall Age roundabout in Kempston off the A6 is shut between there and the M1 at 13 for Bedford, shut both ways. And also in Bedfordshire, the northbound side of the A1, the High Road, a lane shut. There's flooding there too between the Beeston turnoff and the Sandy roundabout there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's a question for you. Do you think the Labour Party is taking immigration seriously enough? Well, speaking at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool yesterday, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper insisted her party is serious at bringing down net migration, but added that the UK must properly train young people to replace overseas workers. Mixed messages once again, and to discuss them, let's join now with the former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib. Ben, welcome to the show. So quite simply, do you think the Labour Party is taking immigration seriously or not?
No, it was Tony Blair who, sorry, forgive me. It was Tony Blair who laid the foundations for mass migration through Open Our Borders. He was the one who was pro-freedom of movement, took us, initially into that project with the European Union, took down our borders, and successive governments have just compounded his mistake. David Cameron recognised the problems that Tony Blair had, created for the country. He said he would take immigration back. He didn't. David Cameron was the heir to Blair. Successive Tory governments have been awful. And now we've just gone back to Labour, roughly with the same agenda, with mass migration. The view they take, I think, from an economic perspective is the more that come, the greater our GDP. The hell with productivity or GDP per capita. The hell with, the undermining of British workers' ability to get a decent wage by cheap imported labour. The hell with the burden on the public sector created by these immigrants. We're going to continue to run this project, and we'll continue to hope, against hope, that somehow GDP goes up and we all get more prosperous. But we've seen that we're not getting more prosperous. GDP per capita has been shrinking over the last 10 quarters. It's going to just get worse under Labour. And of course, that's without even beginning to talk about the costs of this mass migration, both economically and, of course, very importantly, culturally. You know, it is the way we've been practicing this is ripping apart the social fabric in this country.
But Ben Habib, ye of little faith, Yvette Cooper's Border Security Command has promised to smash the gangs. I mean, they're being serious. They've employed 100 extra lawyers.
Yeah, but you don't smash the gangs by sitting in the United Kingdom. Someone needs to tap Starmer and Cooper on the shoulder and remind them these gangs are based in Europe. Some aren't even based in Europe. Some are based outside Europe, promoting people into Europe, then handing them over into the very clearly capable hands of others, who then transport them rather seamlessly and easily across borderless Europe. Never take down your borders. The Schengen zone is a stupid idea. Marching them across Europe to Calais. French police are asleep at the wheel. Of course, they've taken the thick end of £1 billion off the British exchequer. Why wouldn't they? The more people they send us, the more money we give them. So we positively reinforced their bad behavior. And they put them on boats, escort them to the point of our territorial waters. Border Force is the taxi service, free, gratis at the British Exchequer's expense. We give them a warm blanket, a cup of tea, a Kit Kat, escort them to the nearest 4-star hotel. They're not detained. We give them the benefit of a human rights lawyer who will then protect them all the way through whatever process they need to go through to get their asylum application heard. And of course, Labour will accelerate those asylum applications. And what I mean by accelerate them is not determine them in a reasonable way faster. It just literally accelerate them into the country. No, what we're going to see under Labour is a continuation of the destruction, as I see it, of the nation state of the United Kingdom, the taking down of our borders, the continued mass migration to which we've been subjected, and an inability, a reluctance, a refusal to accept that the only way to enforce borders is actually to physically enforce them at the point of entry.
And Ben Habib, that brings us to the political opportunity. Rupert Lowe, a former colleague of yours, MP for Great Yarmouth for Reform, said today that the Labour Party's failure to take immigration seriously will present a huge opportunity for the Reform Party. He says that the red wall will flip to Reform at the next election. How much faith do you have in that?
Well, I think Reform holds the if you like, the next government in its grasp. It's there. It can definitely make it to being the next government. What's critical is that it stays true to its ideology and that it doesn't in any way let down the movement that it's created, the 4.1 million people that have voted for it, and the many millions more, by the way, Martin, as I'm sure you're aware, who would have voted for it, but they were scared into submission by a Conservative Party who told everyone that they'd be splitting the right-wing vote. No, Reform can form the next government. It has challenges ahead of it. It has to professionalise, which I understand it's doing, setting up branch structures. It has to democratise. I've been on the air about that quite a lot recently. And if it can achieve all of that satisfactorily, if it can stay true to the people, if it doesn't vacate the battlefield at a crucial moment, and it continues through to 2029, I think it is every prospect it'll form a government.
Ben Habib, you've been pretty critical in recent days and weeks of Nigel Farage, of the Reform Party. Are you going to get back into the fold? A lot of people contact me here all the time saying, Ben, you're a great asset to the party. When are you going to kiss and make up?
I've not said anything critical about Nigel. I've been critical about the Constitution, which I see as the bedrock of the party's ability to go forward and deliver what it promises to deliver. It is critical, and it should be self-evident, that if Reform, as it does, stands for the democratic unit that is the United Kingdom, it itself must be democratic. And the argument made against democratising the party is that it fears that it might be taken over by malign elements. Well, there are millions of ways to control that, but still give voice to Reform members in order to not just appoint or remove leaders, but, to hold the leadership accountable, to have checks and balances in place. every institution, every organization, every business, every entity, in order to perform, needs to have its leadership held to account. The same applies to Reform UK. If it can make that jump, if it can deliver it, then I think it's onto something. My fear is that the document that was presented last week is actually a document that pretty much I rejected a year and a half ago, doesn't do the trick. But of course, that's in the writing of the document. I've made my views on that very clear. Now what we need to see is, even though I don't think the document's brilliant, let's see how the party leadership works practically on a day-to-day basis. If it can actually deliver practically, so be it. The written word may not be that good, but if it can do it practically, that's great.
That sounds like you're very much open to being courted back into the party. Ben Habib, always a delight to have you on the show. Thank you very much, my old friend. Thank you. Now, moving on, the Princess of Wales is continuing her slow return to royal duties after meeting with her aides to plan her annual Christmas carol service at Westminster Abbey. Magnificent stuff. We'll have that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Richard, the King will probably fly there, I would imagine, with the Queen. You can guarantee they'll have to make a point about offsetting their carbon just to keep that lot happy. They won't use the walkabout term because they'll have to keep the Aboriginal community happy over there. Obviously, they'll be fine that the Queen's face has now been taken off banknotes over there, replaced, I believe, by a member of the Aboriginal community, naturally. You've got all of these tick boxes that the King and the royal family have to do, instead of just maybe, I don't know, leading, being there, being present. Why do they keep bowing down to this stuff?
Well, firstly, as I say, if you look at the Commonwealth, there are 56 countries. Now, I think that's an enormously important institution, and we benefit in all sorts of ways, as do the other countries who are members of it. Now, if you don't take account, with times changing, by the way, of course, as they did during Queen Elizabeth's reign, if you don't take account of various sensitivities, especially certain pressure groups, I'm not suggesting that we write off our history as being something that's dreadful. There are ups and downs and pluses and minuses, we all know that. But the point is to be sensitive to other cultures, and that is absolutely pivotal.
What we're seeing in the UK, a lot of these same issues do crop up in Australia, especially with freedom of speech and saying the wrong thing, getting cancelled. I've met with so many people who have personally, they've been deplatformed, lost their jobs just for having an opinion, just for potentially saying the wrong thing, and then losing their livelihood as a result. So with Australia, I think particularly this is the trend that we saw from 2020 with the lockdowns, especially in Melbourne, some of the harshest lockdown restrictions in the world. Now, Australia is known as being a country of freedom and liberty. So then I think for many Australians, it was a huge turning point, a big wake-up call.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time's 4:51. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Princess of Wales has begun planning her annual Christmas carol concert, marking her return to royal duties after chemotherapy. Princess Catherine held a meeting at Windsor Castle to discuss the events, which will be broadcast this Christmas as she continues to ease back into public engagements. A wonderful story, and I'm joined now by the royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, fantastic stuff. This will be just the kind of royal Christmas message we really, really want, and fantastic news about Catherine's return. Tell us more about this amazing event.
Well, you're absolutely right, because Together Christmas, which is her carol concert, it's been an annual since 2021. And it was on that occasion that she surprised many by showing her skills on the piano. Now, it's become an absolutely pivotal part of the royal calendar. And we know, because it was in the court circular, that she attended a meeting to discuss this at Windsor Castle. It's a second meeting she's attended in a week. Now, that in itself is speaking to us, and it's very, very good news, because we know, because of the recent video message, that she is free of cancer, and that obviously that will be her particular aim to remain so. Clearly that will be the case. But there's no question at all. It's marvellous news, because she's moving back toward royal duties. That's absolutely clear. And the question is, of course, when will we see her next? And, you know, we're all looking forward perhaps to seeing her on Remembrance Day. I'm sure that that is now a definite possibility at the Cenotaph, and subsequently, very definitely, for one of the highlights of the year at Westminster Abbey, which is her concert.
So, Richard, we have a quick 50 seconds here before we have to end this hour. So when can we expect any details, for example, of the choice of carols? Because, I mean, that's what people really want to know. What are the details? When are they going to come out?
Well, I don't know when they will be released. Remember, even now, these meetings and these details, they're being very, very carefully managed. What we've got is very, very good news, but there's no doubt, as she made clear in her recent video message, there is still some way to go, and being cancer-free is her priority, obviously. So let's hope, and also let's hope we might see her at the Albert Hall for the Festival of Remembrance. Just a thought.
Thank you, Richard. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much. It'll be wonderful to look forward to. Now, still to come, stay tuned, because our political editor, Chris Hope, has an exclusive interview with Sir Keir Starmer. Will Homes for Heroes really put our veterans first? And does he regret that sausages howler? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. National Weather with Aidan McGibbon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp. And the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid-Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Still issues in Cumbria between High Scales and Heathfield. The A596 remains closed off. There's an ongoing police incident. The diversion there is via the A595, so that's busier than normal. Eastbound M62, Birchwood at 11 through towards the M60, the Eccles interchange at junction 12. Now there's a breakdown there blocking a lane. It's slow going. Queues in Suffolk, westbound A14 from the west at interchange junction 56 to the Copdock interchange at 55. Reports coming in of an accident looking slow going. Still flooding in Bedfordshire. The A421 between the Marshall Age roundabout and Kempston off the A6 is shut between there and the M1 at 13 for Bedford, shut both ways. And also in Bedfordshire, the northbound side of the A1, the High Road, a lane shut. There's flooding there too between the Beeston turnoff and the Sandy roundabout there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
£30,000 cash? Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
Yes, you see, that is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Oh my God, this is amazing.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Coming up, GB News' political editor Chris Hope sat down with the Prime Minister in New York. We asked him the questions others are simply afraid to ask. Will Homes for Heroes really put armed forces veterans first? And is it time to stop calling protesters racist?
Prime Minister, we're here in New York, but we've come straight from the Labour Party conference. Yes. Your Homes for Heroes announcement has interested GB News viewers. How will you ensure that veterans get priority over, say, asylum seekers?
Well, look, this is a very important commitment that we've made because too many veterans who have, given so much to their country find themselves without a roof over their head. So because we've taken the difficult decisions on planning, decisions that were not taken for years, we can guarantee that they will have a roof over their heads. So Homes for Heroes becomes a reality and not just a slogan.
Ahead of other groups, so importantly.
Yeah, that will require regulation to be passed to make that priority. But it's not ahead of all other groups. This is unlocking, a real step forward on homelessness for many people who are homeless, including, as I was able to announce yesterday, care leavers who are very, very vulnerable, and of course victims of domestic abuse who find themselves without a roof over their head. So yes, it's a very important announcement for veterans, but actually by unlocking and turbocharging the housing, then that allows us to take a big step in relation to homelessness. And I'm very pleased we're able to do it so quickly.
You want to cut migration. What level on the net legal migration are you comfortable with? Under 100,000 a year?
I'm not going to put a number on it, but it needs to come down. I think anybody looking at the numbers would say that is too high. And what I'm very concerned about is that if you look at apprenticeship starts for certain skills, they've gone down in recent at the very same time that visas for those same skills have gone up.
That's employers being lazy, not finding the UK workforce.
I think it's a combined responsibility. I think government, employers, businesses, we need to address it. It is not sensible in anybody's book to have apprenticeship starts going down in the UK only to then have more visas for people coming into the UK. So this is how I do politics, the practical business. How do you get these numbers down? Sort your skills agenda.
So being practical, how will you understand and show your understanding the concerns that are legitimate about immigration in white working class communities? Will you go and dispatch Angela Rayner to speak to people about it?
Well, of course. I mean, we're across the country all the time. I have I don't know how many discussions with people about immigration, and they're important discussions because, as I said in my conference speech yesterday, I do understand people have legitimate concerns about immigration, and we should debate them. And where they say to me, we think migration is too high, then I tend to agree with that. And the reason is among the reasons is because of the skills failure over the last years, and we need to fix that. I think this is a healthy discussion. I don't think it should be something that we shy away from. But what I won't do is allied that with the thuggery on the streets, because I think people who are genuinely concerned about immigration aren't and should not be.
So people are worried are not far right, are they? They're not worried, but they're not far right individuals if they're worried about immigration.
No, absolutely not.
No, quite.
Many people across the country are concerned about immigration, but they wouldn't for a minute go onto the street and throw a brick at a police officer. And I think it is wrong to pretend that they are one and the same. They are not.
Your conference in Liverpool, while we're here, has voted against the winter fuel payment cut. So the policy is wrong, isn't it? Why are you doing it?
Well, look, I understand why colleagues in the Labour movement feel very strongly about this. Conference policy doesn't make government policy, and we've had to take a difficult decision because...
So you'll defy them? You'll defy the vote?
Well, last government left a £22 billion black hole, unaccounted for, off the books. We've got to deal with that. That means tough decisions. But the reason that this is so important is we want to and will stabilise the economy. That means the triple lock is guaranteed, and that means that for pensioners, in addition to the £900 extra this year, there's £460 next year, and so on and so forth throughout the term of a Labour government, so that we can say to pensioners, you will be better off with a stable economy. You will be better off with a Labour government that stabilises the economy.
You want to be a serious government, one of purpose and service. So why is your domestic violence minister at the karaoke last night singing "Hit Me Baby One More Time"? I mean, how does that look to pensioners and to veterans worrying about their homes?
I think the commitment we've made on violence against women and girls is really important, and I think we should talk more about it, because I dealt with this when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, and I know, and you know, that only 1 in 10 victims of domestic violence feels confident enough to come forward to report what's happened. We've made a big government commitment, which is to halve violence against women and girls. That is really hard, and I'm totally focused on that 24/7.
But partying Labour ministers at the same time as you're preaching a funereal message in your speech yesterday, does that tally?
Well, look, I think in the end, if you're a victim of domestic violence, what you want to know is your Prime Minister, is your government absolutely committed to something which will make a material difference? The additional thing there, of course, is that one of the announcements I made yesterday was in relation to victims of domestic abuse and who are homeless, and making sure they've got a roof over their head.
You want to ban smoking in pub gardens, maybe limit pub opening hours. Are we set for 5 years of nanny state under Labour?
Well, let me deal with the second of those straight away. We are not altering opening hours in pubs, so you can go there.
Relief for us all.
When you get back to the UK, you can go for last orders, as I will from time to time. So let me just put that one back in the box. But on smoking, look, we've got to look across the range at how we reduce deaths from smoking, the imposition and the cost to the NHS. So we're looking at a range of options, and we'll obviously consult on them.
Yeah. In terms of freebies, if I can call them those things, you need a £20,000 flat so your son could do revision. It makes you look out of touch to many people. A Labour MP for South Shields, Emma Buck, gives her freebies to charity. She gives them away. Why won't you give things you've had for free back to charity or to a good cause?
Well, all that happened is I wanted somewhere safe and quiet for my son to do his GCSE preparation. I needed it to be secure because of the situation we were in. No exchange of money. There's nothing to give away. Somebody said, well, I'll lend you my place.
But it's worth £20,000.
Yeah, but then what happens, as you know, with declarations is people say, well, I know there was no money exchange. I know you didn't pay and nobody paid you. There's no money to give elsewhere. But we will sort of not make up, but we will say what would be the amount of money should it have been given on a commercial rate, which it wasn't. Now, that's a perfectly sort of legitimate way to do it, but you know, there was no money exchange.
Are these benefits?
It was simply somebody saying, if you want somewhere quiet for your son to study whilst he's doing your GCSE, you can use this place here.
Yes, and just finally, looking at your record as the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mohammed Al-Fayed was not prosecuted for sexual assault against a 15-year-old woman when you were DPP. Have you reflected on that? Do you want to apologise to the victim? You were head of the prosecutorial service at the time.
Well, I've not. That particular case didn't come across my desk. It was dealt with by senior lawyers within the Crown Prosecution Service, and I don't think I certainly haven't had access to the file again. I'm not sure you have. So, you know.
But an apology from the CPS?
Well, look, having not had access to the file myself or yourself, then you know, we're not in that place.
Sir Keir Starmer, thank you for joining us on GB News. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and that was Chris Hope with the Prime Minister. We'll discuss more on that later, but first, let's cross now to New York, where Sir Keir Starmer is addressing the UN Security Council.
And thank you to our briefers. I want to start by paying tribute to those who see these terrible conflicts and walk towards them with no agenda other than helping those in need. The UN and the ICRC have both lost staff this month in Gaza, Lebanon and Donetsk. More than 200 aid workers have been killed so far this year, including British citizens. Their humanity should illuminate the work of this council. Because we have heard again today just how dire the situation has become. The Security Council must deliver its responsibility for global peace and security. So I want to use this meeting to call to action in 3 key areas. First, we need to renew the international consensus on delivering humanitarian support. This should be a bare minimum, yet too often we're falling short. We must address the situation in Gaza. The 7th of October was the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. I utterly condemn the terrorist actions of Hamas. The ordeal of the hostages and their loved ones continues almost a year later. 6 of them were killed in cold blood just a few weeks ago. So I say again, let the hostages go. And we must face up to the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza that continues to deepen by the day. Israel must grant humanitarian access to civilians in line with its obligations under international humanitarian law. There can be no more excuses. Israel must open more crossings, allow vital life-saving aid to flow, and provide a safe environment for the UN and other humanitarian organisations to operate. The civilian suffering in Gaza is beyond belief. So we have restarted our funding to UNRWA, we're supporting UK Med to operate their field hospitals, and we're supporting UNICEF to deliver water, healthcare and specialist treatment for malnourished children. But the most fundamental need is even more basic. They need the fighting to stop. The situation in Sudan also demands our urgent attention. Millions are facing emergency or famine conditions, exacerbated by deliberate attempts to prevent aid reaching those in need. This is now the worst humanitarian crisis in the world today, and the worst displacement crisis, with over 10 million people driven from their homes. It also risks destabilising South Sudan and Chad, which are already suffering their own humanitarian crisis. The UK has doubled its aid for the victims of this war to almost £100 million, but much more is needed. The world must step in. Second, I call on the Security Council to seek political solutions that can break repeated cycles of violence like that in the Middle East. The region is on the brink. We need an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Lebanese Hezbollah, and the implementation of a political plan which allows Israeli and Lebanese civilians to return to their homes to live in peace and security. That security will come through diplomacy, not escalation. There is no military solution here, nor is there a military-only solution to the conflict in Gaza. This Council must demand, again, an immediate, full and complete ceasefire in Gaza with the release of all the hostages. We need a political route to that agreement which provides a bridge to a better future, a credible and irreversible path towards a viable Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure state of Israel. That is the only way to provide security and justice for both Israelis and Palestinians. In June, the UK brought a resolution to this Council on the war in Sudan, calling for both parties to commit to a ceasefire. I repeat that call today. The warring parties must engage in ceasefire talks. We support the Secretary-General's envoy in his efforts towards peace. We must keep working to bring this war to an end, and we must ensure that those responsible for committing atrocities are held accountable. And this leads me to my third and final point. We must ensure accountability for those violating the UN Charter, and this Council must recommit to the values it sets out. Now, this should go without saying. Yet the greatest violation of the Charter in a generation has been committed by one of this Council's permanent members. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is illegal. It threatens global security. It's caused colossal human suffering. Over 35,000 civilians have been killed or injured, 6 million forced to flee, and almost 20,000 Ukrainian children forcefully deported, kidnapped, to put it bluntly. I think of Yaroslav Basilovich, whose wife and 3 daughters were killed earlier this month by a Russian strike on civilians in Lviv. And I wonder how Russia can show its face in this building. 600,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in this war. And for what? The UN Charter, which they sit here to uphold, speaks of human dignity, not treating your own citizens as bits of meat to fling into the grinder. Russia's war has triggered a global energy crisis and a global food crisis, causing hunger in the Horn of Africa. They entered into a UN-brokered Black Sea grain deal, then withdrew. They tried to block the pact for the future. Now the world looks on as Russia deepens its military ties with the likes of North Korea and Iran. There can be no equivocation here. They must be held accountable. Aggression cannot pay. Borders cannot be redrawn by force. Russia started this illegal war. It must end it and get out of Ukraine. We stand with the 89 countries who made clear at the Swiss Peace Summit that Ukraine's territorial integrity must be the basis of any just and lasting peace. Any process that does not recognise this will only be used as a pretext by Russia to regroup and come again. President, in this moment of deepening conflict, the world looks to this Council more than ever to provide leadership for peace, preserve our collective security, and protect the most vulnerable. The United Kingdom will always play its full part in fulfilling that responsibility. Thank you.
Time there in New York. And to discuss what he said, I'm joined by the NATO historian and ex-reserve officer, Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams, who joins me now in the studio. Welcome to the studio, Peter. A lot of talk there about the situation in the Middle East and, of course, in the Ukraine. My first question is, did we learn anything new?
Yeah, there was a lot of talk, a lot of range, bringing in Ukraine as well as the Middle East, but no depth. And, I mean, the Prime Minister really isn't a foreign affairs kind of guy. Domestic policy is where he's much, much stronger. So, I mean, a lot of this could have been written a week ago, and there are no sort of fresh insights, really. Our sending troops to the region has been on the cards for a long, long time for an evacuation purpose. And we've had as much warning as it's possible to give that this kind of sort of situation, where the 10,000 UK residents in Lebanon would need to move sooner or later. So we've had contingency plans in place for a long, long time.
And just to reiterate, the 700 British troops are being sent to Cyprus, to a military base there, a long-established base, as a way to help citizens from Lebanon and the surrounding area evacuate too. There's no implication whatsoever that those troops are going to get involved in any confrontation in the area.
No one is going to Lebanon. They are going to Cyprus, where we've got a sovereign base at Akrotiri. We've got Royal Naval ships there and aircraft, and both of those will be taking part in the evacuation. And that will ensure the smooth passage of people out of Lebanon with the minimum amount of fuss and minimum amount of risk. 1982 is the last time we sent British troops into Lebanon. We suffered a lot of casualties. We're not going to repeat that in any way at all.
And Peter, back to the speech that Sir Keir Starmer just gave at the UN. Any points leapt out to you?
Yeah, I mean, he re-emphasised the point that it's a two-stage solution. Both states need to have a hand in this, and ultimately this rests on politics, not the application of military force. And in that, he's absolutely right. There is no end to a ground invasion just targeting military sites if beyond that you can't see a political solution. And that's what the UN generally will have been saying. That's what he's agreeing with. But there's no great sort of insight or depth there beyond that, how that would come about.
And there was talk, again, of an immediate ceasefire, the handing back of the hostages. They've been saying that for some time now. The trouble is Hamas don't seem to be listening.
Yeah, we don't have any... I mean, we don't have any traction as the United Kingdom. And that's the problem. So the United Kingdom's Prime Minister can go to New York all he wants and pontificate like this. It's not going to make a slightest scrap of difference on the ground, except he's recorded as saying those words.
So it's performative.
Totally. Sadly, we need more depth. We need more insight into what's going on from our commander-in-chief, as it were. And I don't see we've got that.
And the primary power here, of course, is the United States.
I'm not sure it is anymore. I think the primary power has sort of drifted in the way of sort of places like Dubai and Delhi and other sort of regional capitals who are power brokers. Ankara would be another one. A lot of people are sort of talking about, well, are the Russians going to take advantage of the situation? They're not. 25% of the Israeli population are Russian. There are a substantial number of Russians also in Beirut as well. So the Russians don't have anything to gain out of this at all. This is purely a Middle Eastern affair, with the Israelis sailing as close to the wind as they dare. Hezbollah not preparing to back down. But there's a substantial United Nations peacekeeping force there that everybody's forgetting about. It's 10,000 strong. So they're still in place. They're not going anywhere. So I don't see a major ground invasion. Whenever Israel invades, they don't do very well. So it's not World War III round the corner, as a lot of newspapers this morning were suggesting. It's not full-on war at the moment. It's a few Israeli planes flitting over Beirut, loosing missiles and causing a lot of casualties, which is getting both sides up and causing huge disruption around the world and at the UN. But that's not full-on war.
Excellent analysis. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams in the studio there. Now I'll bring you all the analysis to our exclusive interview with Sir Keir Starmer next. Quite a few bombshells been dropped there. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Founded in 1990 in Knightsbridge in London, the Beverly Hills Bakery offers some of the finest American baked goods in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills Bakery has delivered gifts to all the UK Prime Ministers of the last 20 years, with, I think, the exception of Sir Keir Starmer so far, and provided gifts for the royal family and for royal births. As we near the 35th anniversary of the bakery, I'm joined by the owner and head pastry chef, Rosa de Souza, and Manuel de Souza, who is the director of the Beverly Hills Bakery. How marvellous to see you both. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, why has this formula worked? Why did London need a Beverly Hills Bakery?
What we do is we're a bakery, but underlying it's actually a gifting experience.
Right.
So this is an alternative to flowers. So in terms of concept, that has maintained its originality despite going on for 35 years. And in fact, what I do is I often ask myself, why is it going strong? To remind myself to focus on those things that we need to focus on.
So instead of sending a bunch of flowers, you send a beautiful box of cakes like that, or confection like that, complete with bunnies and so on.
Exactly. So you have the concept on the one hand, but you also need the quality of product that goes inside. And I think that's where Beverly Hills Bakery has got a great product.
And it's where Rosa comes in, isn't it?
Yes.
So when did you start to bake? Did you start to bake domestically in your home, and did it spread from there?
We started from home. My mother's baking, where we didn't have all the stoves and things like that. We baked on the charcoal, you know, like degrees.
Yes.
And we started baking. I learned from my mother the baking.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. I'm still joined in the studio by the NATO historian and the ex-reserve officer, Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams, who's with me in the studio. We reacted a short while ago to Sir Keir Starmer at the UN there in the United Nations. But at the top of the hour, you listened into our exclusive interview with Chris Hope with Sir Keir Starmer. And we were putting to him the questions about yesterday's big announcement, an announcement that has to be said caught the eye of a lot of patriots, a lot of veterans, homes for heroes. The notion, as it was packaged, that armed services veterans, particularly those who are homeless, would be prioritised and given social housing. Chris Hope, our political editor, said to the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, would that mean specifically that veterans were put to the front of a queue? I mean, that's the way that I would have interpreted that policy, right? And specifically, he said, would they be ahead of asylum seekers in that queue? The answer was unequivocal. It is not ahead of all other groups. It is unlocking a real step forward on homelessness for many people who are homeless, including, as I was able to announce yesterday, care leavers and survivors of domestic abuse and veterans. That says to me, Peter, Homes for Heroes made a great headline, but it's not actually putting armed services veterans to the front of the queue, as many thought. What's your take on that?
He's not doing that at all. Homelessness, talking about that, absolutely brilliant. And, you know, a lot of work needs to be done there. But putting armed forces veterans to the front of the queue, the moment you start to unpack that policy and you ask him about the details, what housing, where, are there going to be armed forces communities, how is this going to happen, hasn't been thought through, in fact, hasn't been plotted or planned in any way at all, otherwise he would have told us. So this is, in my interpretation, mere words. And worse than that, I mean, what he's done is he's taken Lloyd George's same slogan from after the First World War, there will be homes for heroes after the fighting is over, at the end of the First World War, from the 1920s, so even 100 years ago, exactly those same words were being used. They're now being reiterated again. Lloyd George didn't deliver then. I don't see, on the current basis of what the Prime Minister's saying, that there's anything concrete that is there and undeliverable at the moment.
Could I ask you, I speak to a lot of veterans, I've been speaking to a lot of them today about this, and they were initially saying, this is great, this is what we've been asking for many, many months, if not years, the notion that tens of thousands, you know, of asylum seekers are coming to Britain and being prioritised. Constantly we heard, well, what about our own homeless? And in particular, what about our armed services homeless veterans who now find themselves on Skid Row? Something which they were crying out to happen. This, we felt, would address that. It doesn't seem to do that, or at least it seems to offer a solution, a soundbite. But in terms of delivery, they won't be at the front of the queue at all. How do you think that would go down with the veteran community?
Like a lead balloon. I mean, quite obviously. I mean, at the end of the day, if you are prepared to lay your life down for your country, then when you come home, you need some help getting back on your own 2 feet. And part of that package is a job and a home to go to. And this is not addressing that at all. These are just meaningless words at the moment.
And it's exasperating to hear that, isn't it? Because a lot of people will be looking at this policy, as I said, and I certainly was when this was announced yesterday. We covered this live on the show, and I was like, wow. Yeah, to be credit where it's due. That's fantastic. Precisely the kind of thing people were crying out for. And then when you pull the bonnet up, and even upon the first casual cross-examination, it seems to not be delivering on the key directive, and that is you should be prioritised. You should, having served your country, surely be ahead of somebody who came here illegally on a dinghy.
I think what's disappointing is Labour has had so long in opposition to get their act together, and particularly under Starmer. So he hasn't had just a few weeks or months to put together policies. He's had years and years of think tanks and advisors and focus groups to come up with these ideas, and to be as nebulous as he is, just weeks into a new administration, is incredibly disappointing for the armed forces community. They really, because in today's world, the offer needs to be as good as possible. And the armed forces being stretched enough as it is, but when they leave at the end, you need to feel that they're being looked after with open arms and being given this priority of housing, jobs, and all the rest of it. And these words don't take us any further forward at all.
Peter, do you think there's something worse that could happen here, and that is a sense of betrayal, of being offered priority treatment, being offered what they deserve, what they absolutely deserve? We get thousands and thousands of messages here at GBNews all the time. Why aren't veterans treated with more respect? Finally, yesterday, it appeared that was happening. Now it seems there's no priority treatment. You'll be in the same bracket as domestic abuse survivors, the same bracket as those who care workers. You won't be put ahead of the queue of asylum seekers. The sense of betrayal could be massive.
Well, that's what happened in the 1920s, and the veterans became very politically active. So what we don't want is history repeating itself. I mean, he's now got the chance to sort of double back and say, actually, I did mean to put veterans at the top of the queue. So here's the challenge. Because at the moment, that's what he hasn't done. It's just a catchphrase. What we need is something far more concrete than we've been given. Because, I mean, this is... Where's the phrase come from? Help for heroes. Which did wonders for our armed forces and gave them a real sense of self-respect. So the alliteration is exactly the same. But there's nothing in it at the moment. And therefore, it's pretty pointless to start waving this banner around if it hasn't been thought through.
And Peter, many people will just be scratching their heads and thinking, how is it beyond the government to establish several thousand houses for veterans when they've established hotels and accommodation for tens of thousands of illegal asylum seekers? How can they not do it?
Well, they've already talked about bringing in, ramping up the number of homes to be built. So surely this should be an adjunct of that. And rather than tagging Homes for Heroes onto homelessness, this is a completely different agenda. And, I say again, when the armed forces are different, when you sign on, you sign this blank cheque of unlimited liability that possibly involves you laying your life down for your country, and you need something at the other end that's going to deliver, and this isn't it.
Thank you very much for those sobering words. That's Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams. Thank you very, very much for joining me in the studio. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including Sir Keir Starmer has racked up 65,000 air miles since becoming Prime Minister. Will this undermine his quest to hit that beloved net zero target? But first, here's your headlines, and it's Mark White.
Good evening, it's 5:33. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. The Prime Minister has told British nationals in Lebanon to leave immediately as around 700 UK troops are deployed to Cyprus. Sir Keir Starmer's warning comes as the Israeli military confirmed it was now preparing for a possible ground invasion against the Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon.
A very important message for British nationals in Lebanon, which is the time to leave is now. The contingency plans are being ramped up, but don't wait for those. There are still commercial flights. It's very important that they hear my message, which is to leave and to leave immediately.
Well, warning sirens sounded in Tel Aviv this morning as a missile was intercepted by air defence systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. Hezbollah has confirmed it launched a missile targeting Mossad headquarters. It claims the intelligence agency is responsible for assassinating leaders and blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon. The Prime Minister is at the centre of fresh controversy over a decision to accept several weeks' accommodation at a luxury property in London. The accommodation was made available by Labour donor Lord Ali, and the stay was valued at around £20,000. Sir Keir defended his decision to accept the offer, saying it was because his son needed somewhere to revise for his GCSEs. He said the family home was besieged by journalists during the election campaign. Detectives investigating the attempted abduction of a baby on a train in Nottinghamshire have released an image of their prime suspect. British Transport Police say the man grabbed the baby girl from a mother's arms and took off down the carriage as the Northern train service approached Worksop station. A relative managed to grab the baby back from the man. The attempted abduction happened in August, but police have now released the image as other inquiries have been unable to identify the suspect. The government has reaffirmed its intention to cut the winter fuel allowance, despite a vote at the Labour Party conference to reverse the controversial move.
Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel! Save the winter fuel!
The motion was put forward by the Unite Union, which has accused the government of embarking on austerity Mark II. Although the vote isn't binding, it does put further pressure on Labour over its decision to take away the benefit from millions of pensioners. Philip Schofield is returning to the television 16 months after his departure from ITV's This Morning. The former TV star will appear on the Channel 5 show Castaway. The programme's producers released this promotional video as the 62-year-old told his followers on Instagram, "Now you know how I spent my summer, alone for 10 days, no food, no water, no crew." Well, Schofield resigned from ITV last May after he admitted an affair with a younger male colleague. There you go, you're right up to date. We'll have more news for you at 6 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Mark White. If that wasn't good enough, it's now my favourite part of the show. I'm joined by Michelle Dewberry, the queen of primetime political debate. Of course, Jubes & Co. 6 or 7 Jubes. What's on your menu?
Are we prioritising that over the when it comes to patient safety in the NHS? Is it all too big now, this whole NHS? Has it all gone too far? Can it be reformed or not? And I also want to look into this whole notion, actually, of your bank accounts. How transparent should they be if people suspect that you have been up to no good? I've got Peter Hitchens and Aaron Bastani keeping me company. Expect lots of feisty debates.
And always up to no good on your show, Michelle Dewberry. That's why it's amazing. That's superb. Jubes & Co. 6 till 7 right after this. Stay tuned. Thank you. Now, stay tuned as we'll bring a veteran's reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's exclusively telling GB News that he cannot guarantee the veterans will be put ahead of asylum seekers in housing waiting lists. An astonishing revelation. That's next.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp, and the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter but chilly.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems on the M6 in Cheshire. A car broke down, blocking off the inside lane northbound from junction 17 to 18 from Crewe towards Middlewich, causing queues. In Lincolnshire, the A52, the Sleaford Road, is blocked through Boston. The level crossing barrier is stuck, so there are long queues on the surrounding routes. Just trying to find out if that's affecting East Midlands Railway. I'll keep you updated. And for another day, south of Bedford, the A421 remains closed because of flooding. Long queues on the M4 westbound as well, from junction 25 to 25A, just before the Bringlass tunnels north of Newport. The lane's blocked off by an accident. In West Sussex, north of Littlehampton, the A259 Worthing Road closed eastbound after a car and a pedestrian collided. And buses still in for trains between Bletchley and Bedford for emergency engineering work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's a ghost. Welcome back. It's 5:41. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, some breaking news to bring you now. The Daily Mirror is reporting that 37 prisoners jailed for breaching restraining orders have been wrongly released under the government's emergency scheme to free up space. Wrongly released. And 5 prisoners have not yet been returned to jail, but the remainder have been brought back into custody. A Ministry of Justice spokeswoman says, "We are working with the police to urgently return a very small number of offenders who were charged incorrectly and sentenced under repealed legislation into custody." There we go. More cons on the loose. Mistakenly released. But don't worry, it's only a very small number of them. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has exclusively told GB News that he cannot guarantee that veterans will not be put ahead of asylum seekers on housing waiting lists. Let's cross now to our political editor, Chris Hope, in New York for some analysis on that fantastic exclusive. Chris, are we there?
Martin, yeah, hi. Welcome back to New York City, where Sir Keir Starmer, as you've seen on our channel, has been speaking to the UN Security Council. But he did sit down with GB News to answer the questions which our viewers and listeners want to hear about. And we do know from your inbox, Martin, how people welcomed, of course, the support for veterans, getting veterans in the front of the housing queue. They're doing that by removing the right to have to prove you have a link to an area to get onto that list. But the concern is, we're seeing in our inbox, aren't we, is will veterans go ahead of illegally arrived migrants? And Sir Keir Starmer couldn't say that. He did say there would be some legislation to make this happen, but prioritising it over other groups he couldn't guarantee, and that will be a worry for some veterans.
Well, more than a worry, Chris. It seemed yesterday when that policy was announced, we covered it live on the show, we were very, very excited, in fact relieved. It's like, wow, this is a great policy. It will appeal to patriots, it will appeal to the Red Wall, it will certainly appeal to GB News viewers, and for damn sure as mustard, it will appeal to armed services veterans. It seemed at long last one of the long-standing exasperations of the veteran community. They felt they weren't being treated with respect. They weren't being treated with the same respect, in fact, as people who come here illegally on dinghies. A key question was, will they jump the queue? It's a straightforward question and a straightforward answer, Chris Hope. The Prime Minister couldn't guarantee that. Is that a betrayal?
He said not over all other groups, but they're trying to unlock the issue and get people off the streets if they're veterans and victims of domestic violence, so you can move somewhere else and not have to prove you've got a link to that area. Well, clearly they will try. We're making the point to them on GB News, but as things stand, the PM couldn't guarantee that. But also, Martin, also elsewhere in the interview, I was struck by the language on immigration, saying quite clearly, absolutely not. It's not a far-right issue to be worried about immigration in your area. We asked him, will you go out and push out Angela Rayner, other ministers into other parts of the country to understand that concern we see in our basket at GB News? And he seemed open to the idea of that. So maybe, just maybe, they're starting to listen to the concerns of GB News viewers, Martin.
And you also asked in that interview, an excellent interview, about would there be an engagement with white working class communities around the country, something we talk about a lot on the show. We saw post-2011, the black riots in Tottenham. The political landscape was very keen to understand the underlying social causes. There hasn't been that conversation so far about the riots across the northern parts of England. Do you think Keir Starmer said to you that he is in the mood to kickstart that conversation now?
I think he is. I think he did seem open to it. I mean, what was surprising was that kind of almost a hand reached out by government towards those communities. He says to us he did understand that people have legitimate concerns about immigration and we should debate with them. And he also understands that migration is too high. He tends to agree with that. We know it's coming down because of measures taken by the last Tory government. But what he wouldn't do, what is crucial, I think, in assessing the success of this government in tackling net migration and illegal migration, but the biggest one is net migration, he wouldn't give us a level, a cap, with the level that level is set. He knows the problems of putting numbers on that figure when you can't really control it. But the point about Brexit is he was given back that control in that vote by voters in 2016. The Tory government failure was not to use those powers. Why can't Labour?
OK, Chris Hope, excellent there. Asking the questions the others fear to ask. That's Chris Hope there, live in New York. Thank you very much. Great story. We'll be back to you again for more analysis later in the evening. Now, still to come between now and 6 p.m, I'll be joined in the studio by an Army veteran and ask him what he makes of the fact that Sir Keir Starmer cannot guarantee that veterans will not be put ahead of asylum seekers on those housing waiting lists. You will not want to miss his reaction. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry has got in touch with a lot of people surrounding the royals about a possible return, some sort of easing himself back into what goes on in this country and tries to repair his image. This has been reported today in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, the major move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold, as he's allegedly growing dissatisfied with advice from American-based image experts.
Let's now speak to Jack Stooks. Now, Jack is a former gardener, senior gardener, top man at Highgrove there. And did you know Harry, Jack?
Yes, yeah, I did. The Harry I knew was always amazing, really good, lovely to be around. I think everybody wanted to be around him, really. He was the sort of life and soul of the family. What we've got to remember is at the time, you know, we knew a book was coming out. We knew various things might come from that. We knew that there was problems with Meghan's family, and there was a lot going on at the time. I think things have, you know, sort of been brushed aside to an extent. Whether or not the book was a mistake, I mean, he might think it was a mistake. He might not think it was a mistake. What we tend to do is we judge him on just the fact that he wrote the book. What we don't think is, why did he write the book? You know, we don't ask the questions as to there was a reason behind him having to have his story known. And maybe, you know, he needed that. Maybe he felt he just needed people to know his side of the story. Hopefully, you know, that family can forgive. I mean, not forget, but be able to sort of move on in a different way.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 10:06 now for some immediate and visceral reaction to Sir Keir Starmer telling GB News exclusively that veterans will not be prioritised on housing lists. They will not be put ahead even of asylum seekers. I'm joined by the Army veteran Sean Johnson. Sean, you overheard that interview there, and I just want to get your immediate kind of emotional response to the fact that, you know, yesterday Homes for Heroes promised the notion that veterans would be put first. Today, they're not even being put ahead of asylum seekers.
And never was. Am I shocked? No, because this has been going on for years. Let's go back to 2011 when the Armed Forces Covenant was first brought into action. It would be honoured by all councils and everything else. And I know from the work I do, that is just not the case. They're not, because people aren't honouring anything at all. So what happens is when you get this news after news, this is happening, that's happening, people, it's like the crying wolf. It gets tiring. So I'm not surprised that this is going to happen, because it's not going to happen. And I'll give you some examples of that, Martin.
Yeah. Go on. So the kinds of people, the kind of former servicemen that you work with, the kind of situations they get themselves involved. You telling me some of their stories and why they need help.
I was, mate, because when I left the military, the last thing you have to worried about was where you were going to live. It was the last thing on your mind. And I came out through an injury, and I was quite fortunate. I connected well and had some good support network around me, but some people don't. And I was in Hyde Park a good few years ago, and somebody called out Jono, my old military nickname, and I thought, I haven't heard that for a couple of years. I turn around in Hyde Park, and there's a chap standing there. Couldn't have been more dishevelled if you try to cast him in a movie. He was at his worst. I looked beyond him, and then I turned around. He called me again. Now, it was a guy called Petal. I won't use his full name, but I served with him in the military. He was the smartest chap you could ever imagine. And now here he was standing with a bag of I don't know what was in the bag. He stank, and he was all over the place. But he had a smile on his face. And I took him in to my back home, and I got him cleaned up, and the stench was awful. But I couldn't understand why Mick had gone from that to this, where he'd lost absolutely everything, until he unravelled. Now, I do a lot of work. I do a lot of work in certain areas. I've made a film about homelessness. I'm on a YouTube channel called On Parade UK. We interview veterans all the time. And I work for a fantastic military charity, the Poppy Factory. And I work with veterans every single day across the whole of the UK. And one of the main questions we ask is, what's their homeless situation? Do they need support? And a lot of our guys do. So we have to point them in the right direction and try and get them embedded into the local community the best we can through our expertise.
Can I ask you, this announcement promised the world yesterday.
Yeah.
Today, it seems to have failed to deliver any concrete prioritisation for veterans. How does that make you feel, and how will that make the armed services community feel?
Well, let's look at the situation now. I've just rolled in a few miles away to the studios. A lot's gone on. We're sending 700 troops out to Cyprus. Biden's on about some breaking news of and then, of course, now you've got the situation now where people want to join the armed forces at their young ages now. How are they going to join the armed forces if there's all this talks going on that they might, when they come out of it, whatever their time is, they've got nowhere to live. So it's quite disappointing. Like I said to you, Martin, it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise.
Sean Johnson, thank you very much for joining us. Terrible situation there. Thanks for your reaction. That's all from me for now. Jubes & Co. is up next. I'll be back at 7 o'clock tonight. I'm covering for Nigel Farage. We're sure to be talking about this situation again, that's for sure. In that exclusive today, the Armed Services veterans no doubt will be very, very disappointed by Homes for Heroes promising the world yesterday and today, perhaps failing to deliver. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now it's time for your weather, and here's Aidan McGibbon. Thanks, mate.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy and wet for many of us through the rest of today. The rain does clear from the south later on as this area of low pressure moves its rain bands north across the UK, clearing to showers in the southwest, whilst brighter skies remain for northern Scotland, albeit with here also a few showers. As we go into the evening, the main area of rain, though, moves through Wales into the Midlands and then eventually settles upon northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. A damp night to come in these areas, whilst showers push back into the south and southwest. Some heavy downpours overnight, along with a gusty wind. 12 to 13 Celsius by dawn in the south, so mild here, but rather chilly as we begin things for northern Scotland. A few showers, but otherwise bright enough for the far north of Scotland. Some sunshine around first thing. Caithness, Sutherland, Orkney, as well as the Western Isles seeing blue skies. But come further south into Central Belt, it's cloudy, it's damp. And the more persistent and heavier rain will be affecting Northern Ireland and most especially northeast England, where there is the risk of localised flooding, some transport disruption first thing, because of 50 to 80 millimetres of rain expected to accumulate through the day. That rain also continuing to affect North Wales, parts of the North Midlands. But for the southern half of England, as well as South Wales, well, there will be some brightness around, but also some heavy showers, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and some gusty winds along the coast. Those winds, though, coming from the southwest will bring milder air, so where we avoid the showers, temperatures will reach 18 Celsius. Further north, a cold day to come, particularly under the rain across northern England. Then that rain continues into the evening. It does gradually sink south and it becomes heavier for a time through parts of mid-Wales into the Midlands and East Anglia. That again could cause some issues. By Friday, the rain's clearing away and we'll see a mix of bright spells and showers. Saturday and Sunday also look brighter.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays near the Cheshire-Staffordshire border do continue on the M6. The motorways down to 2 lanes northbound, 2 lanes are blocked off from junctions 16 to 17 towards Crewe, past the scene of an accident. In Lincolnshire, the A52 at Boston is blocked along the Sleaford Road. The level crossing barrier is stuck on down. And in Northamptonshire, the A14 is blocked eastbound from junction 8 to 9 near Kettering, following a serious accident. In West Sussex, north of Littlehampton, the A259 Worthing Road shut eastbound. A car and a pedestrian collided off Fitzallen Road, so just east of the Wick roundabout. And in Devon at Exeter, Topsham Road, that's closed following a serious accident near the crematorium. Buses are in for South Western Railway trains between Bagshot and Camberley after a tree fell on the line. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's an incredible £36,000 to be won in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having an extra £3,000 each month to play with. And because it's totally tax-free, you get to keep every penny and spend it however you like.